Hey, did you ever have anyone ask, if you had the chance to do it again, what would you do differently? We've done that a few times in class. When we do things differently, that means we're taking our experiences and using those to make our next thing better. When you do something over and over and over again, you end up with experience. That's the product of your work. The dictionary says that experience is practical contact with something or observation of facts and events. Last week, we made some face masks. Did a fantastic job. You now have experience with those masks, and you can ask yourself, if you had the chance to do it again, what would you do differently? Keep in mind, now what you have is experience. You know things. You know what to expect. You know where things can go wrong, and you know when things are correct. That means you can predict what's next. You can try something new or different to improve your control, consistency, and efficiency. So, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently? Just stop and think about that for a few minutes. What would you do differently on your face mask? Could you improve it? Most people can. They can think of ways to improve because they now have experience. What we want to do next for our project this week is try to make more than one thing. If we stopped and looked at face masks, we talked about, there's a face mask a friend of mine made. Little side straps, very similar to the ones that you probably made at home. The trick with this, and tying it back to manufacturing, is can we make more than one of these? If we can make more than one, we can be consistent. What if we had to make 2, or 3, or 10, or 100? What we need to do then is we need to actually think. And we want to focus on making multiple things that are exactly the same. Not just this, but how about this? 2 that are exactly the same, that are made with the same process, made with the same materials. Okay? When we do that, we take control of what we're doing, we are consistent in our work, and our work becomes efficient. We can modify things and still have same control, same consistency, and same efficiency, and just use a different material. Now what we end up with is an aesthetic difference instead. Okay? What we want to try to do again this week for our project is to try to make 2 things that are exactly the same. That means that we understand our control, we understand our consistency, and we work efficiently. Like our masks, we need to plan what we want to do, a guide that's going to guide our control. We need to have a process that's consistent and efficient. And that way we end up with quality projects, and not just one, but more than one, that are exactly the same and consistent. What I'm going to do today is to show you a project that I'm working on, see how I used work to make my plan, see how I developed a repeatable process, and how I ended up with multiple products that are of quality and exactly the same. Let's take a look at that project.
Like all our projects, I started with ideation, figuring out what I wanted to do. I went on to Pinterest, see what others had done, and I started to understand how the project could go together.
For my planning stage, I needed to understand what I could control. That started with understanding measurements, the sizes thing could be so that the chair that I made was usable for most people. When we build things to fit people, we call that making something ergonomically correct. I want my chair to be comfortable and provide proper posture when someone sits in it. Then I looked at geometry. What are the shapes I'm using and how do they fit together? For this, I looked at several plans to help me understand how this type of chair is typically constructed. That helped me develop my plan. Then with an idea and knowledge of size, shape, and general construction, I began my plan on Aspire. You can see the arm of the chair that I made, that I created in Aspire in my drawing format. My drawing was accurate because I used my knowledge of math and geometry and the Aspire program to create it. I took control. I then created my other parts. My drawing then became a tool path I could cut on my CNC machine. This will help me be consistent. I can cut the same pieces over and over again. Now I can improve my efficiency. How about I cut 8 at a time?
Once we have our planning stage completed, we thought our project through, we used our ideation, we came up with a plan that we think is going to work. We've solved some problems. We've used a little bit of math, a little bit of geometry. We understand what it is that we're going to do. We now have to have a method to do that. We call that step our process. My CNC machine here provides me a huge advantage when it comes to consistency and efficiency. My job in the process was really to set up my drawings on the computer, which you saw, to run the machine, tell it what to do, and to actually sit here, mount boards onto the machine, and let the machine do it accurately, consistently, efficiently. Okay? My part was actually fairly easy. Machine setup and running some files. Let's take a look at how some of those projects came out after I cut them. So let's take a look at how I did. What I was supposed to do was to make all of the parts for my chairs. Here they are. One of the big advantages that I had was the consistency I mentioned of my CNC machine. It's consistent and it's efficient. Because of that, it makes my job easy. It's kind of like having an employee. But the machine only does what I tell it to do. Okay? Again, I'm the brains in the operation. The computer everyone thinks is smart. The CNC machine, everyone thinks is smart. At the end of the day, all it does is what I tell it to do. It's a really great employee. So I have to tell it all the right things. I think that I do a reasonable job of that. But even with that, I have some errors. Keep in mind what we're talking about this week is attempting to be consistent. That can I make parts over and over and over again and end up with the same result? Because of my thought process in my planning, my consistency in my process of actually constructing the materials, and then punching those things out on my CNC machine actually provides me extreme consistency. You can take a look at a few of the parts. This is an arm for my chair. You saw the plan for this. I had to make a bunch of these. I have enough here to make 12 different chairs. There's 2 on each one. That means I need 24. I have 24 arms right here, all exactly consistent. Every single one exactly like the next one. This is a base support that actually holds the basic frame of the chair together. Again, I needed to make 2 for each chair, 12 chairs, 24 pieces. I even drilled all the holes. I had the CNC machine drill all the holes in the right locations for these parts. This is a back support. You saw this too on my drawing. Okay. I made a bunch of these too. I only need 1 of these for each chair, so I need a dozen of these pieces. These are pieces that sandwich in the back, and in order for these to work, they have to line up perfectly. And notice how accurate they are. Nice and perfect. I'm actually ready to assemble all of these parts together. I just have to wait for my bolts and my screws, which I ordered on Amazon. Those should be here next week. Okay? So then I had to figure out how can I show you a final project. So I did one other little thing, and I'll show you that too.
This is my daughter Kelly and her husband Paul. They're having a baby next month. This is my son Corey and his wife Rachel. They're having a baby in July. So I was thinking, could I take my chair scale it down to a smaller size and make it fit for a toddler? If I was going to do that, I'd need to reconsider all of my dimensions to make sure that my chair was properly fit, sized correctly for a small child. So it was back to the drawing board, start all over again. Then back to the CNC machine and recut all of the parts. Next, I had to make sure that my parts were correct, half size of the original size. Those parts were all cut out of a single sheet. Gathered all those parts together and got ready to assemble them.
So, my project is complete. Mini Adirondack chairs. 50% of the size. 1/2 scale. Had to do a little bit of math, a little bit of refiguring, considering lots of factors about the size difference between someone like me and someone who's a toddler, under a year old. This was the leg support, my original chair support, overall size, 36 3/8 of an inch long. This is my new half scale. This one is 18 3/16 plus 18 3/16 would equal 36 3/8. 50% of the original size, 1/2 scale. How'd it work out? Let's check it out. Mini Adirondack chair. Here's that leg we just talked about. There's the arm. You compare that to the full-size arm. Remember I showed you this piece too, the back support. There's the back of the chair. There's that back support. And there's the other one, the full-size one. Okay, half the size. We said that what we wanted to try to do this week was to make two things that were exactly the same. And that's exactly what I did. One, two. Exactly the same. I had a huge advantage with very careful planning, consistent, precise process using my CNC machine, and I end up with a high quality product that's reproducible. I can repeat that same process over and over and over again with same quality results. That's what we want to try to do this week. I want to have you make two things that are exactly the same. That means that you need to plan. You need to figure your process because you're going to have to follow it twice. Okay? We also want to end up with two products that are as close as possible to exactly the same. So, what can you make? I have a huge advantage with this machine and with my shop that's filled with machines just like the shop at the high school. You have to decide what it is you can make. First, decide what you like. What can you do? What do you have access to? What do you have for supplies? If you like to sew, maybe you'd like to make 2 face masks like we did before. Try to make them exactly the same. Maybe instead you like to cook. Could you make 2 dinners that were exactly the same? When we go to a restaurant, one of the reasons we enjoy a specific restaurant is because we know what we're going to get. Sometimes we order the same thing over and over again because we like it, because it's consistent. Can you do that if you were cooking a meal for your family? Could you make a dessert? Make cookies. I talked before about Chip Ahoy cookies that said that they had 16 chips in every cookie. Can you be that consistent? Can you make something twice and make it exactly the same? That's what we want to do. Consider what you have for tools and what you have for supplies. You can make something out of paper. You can make something out of clay. You can make something out of Legos if you want. What we want to try to do is we want to try to make sure that we make 2 things exactly the same. And we want to consider as we're doing it. Remember, we started off by saying if you had the opportunity to do it again, what would you do differently? What we did was we built up our own skill. We built our experience. What we want to do is utilize your experience of making one item so that we can make 2 items, and then 3, and 4, and 5, and 100, and 1,000. That's our goal. Consistency in manufacturing. Okay, I'll post some information up on Schoology for you. What I'd like this time, 3 things. Just like our last project, like a picture of your project planning and preparation, a picture of your project process, and a picture of your final product. Like to have you in all 3 of those photographs, okay? Nice easy way to communicate back and forth with me, see that you're doing the work. Last project on the masks, the face masks, awesome job. I shared that with Mr. Pignataro and Ms. Koza over the weekend. They were very impressed with your work. Let's keep that thing going. Have a good week, folks.